Contrabassoon 101, Making the Leap with Leyla Zamora. Stay inspired.
The name of the presentation is Contra 101, Making the Leap to the Low Realm of Contra Playing. So this presentation is catered for any bassoonist or teacher or conductor or composer who wants to know a little bit about the contrabassoon. It's a very basic presentation, and in this little presentation we're going to examine the basic characteristics of the contrabassoon compared to the bassoon. Very relevant, so you can see the difference. Even though they are family, it's like learning another language when you play the contrabassoon. We're going to see the anatomy of the contra, the setup, the range of the instruments, the reeds, and then some insights of my own personal experience as a contrabassoonist in a professional orchestra. So why don't we begin? So all bassoonists who have had formal studies with a teacher at a conservatory school know that there is a well-defined curriculum for the study of the bassoon. But how many schools have a curriculum, especially for contrabassoon? We are in denial. Let's face it, friends. The contrabassoon is the elephant in the living room of most bassoon studios. What happens is that during the school year, some students are persuaded or bribed into playing contra to fulfill the wind ensemble or orchestra needs, when the instrumentation of the repertoire requires contrabassoon. And without proper previous knowledge, throwing oneself into playing contra could be a very risky and traumatizing proposition. If, for instance, the piece is Mother Goose or Beethoven 5 or 9 symphonies. So in the end, you end all traumatized and hating the instrument because you couldn't perform it properly. Yes, the bassoon and the contrabassoon are cousins, but there are huge differences in size, anatomy, and technical challenges in the successful execution of the instrument. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between the instruments and their own idiosyncrasies. So we're going to start with the very basics. In the picture, you can see the dimensions of each instrument and see that a contra is larger and heavier. The contrabassoon in a hard case is around 20 kilograms or 45 pounds. And of course, there are variations to these measurements. Different types of wood and metals use extra keys or interchangeable bells. And I just wanted to say one thing. Right now, Fox is making these bassoons that with mountain wood, and it's like 10 pounds, like 5 kilograms lighter. So measurements and dimensions are changing in the instruments as we evolve. Okay, I also would like to mention two new instruments that are making the rounds. This is a contraforte, a fairly new instrument on the market. The player is Lou Liebnick, and he's a contra player of the National Symphony in Washington, and I believe he's the only one who has replaced the contra for the contraforte in a major symphony orchestra in the United States. But I know that there is a contraforte player in Mexico and another in another Russian orchestra. Those are the two people that I know that constantly play contraforte in the orchestra. And of course, there are freelancers. On the west coast of the United States, we have Chris King. I wanted to talk about him because he's a freelancer and has recorded a great deal of very cool contraforte pieces. If you are interested in listening to him playing the contra and what he has done, he has commissioned pieces, and he has a group called the Key Contraptions, and he has played duets with a contrabass flute and has other recordings in his website. You can see it in the lower right side, kingchristopher.com. Just check it out. It's just an amazing site and he made his own recordings and his own arrangements. He's very cool, and he he loves playing contraforte. Um, Take a note of the differences of the contraforte vocals and reeds. On the left, you see this contraforte, it has some nipples because it has like 6 vents instead of 4 vents. And these little contraptions in the left side and in the vocal of the contraforte are attached to cables that look like bicycle brakes. But I don't want to talk a lot about the contraforte, but you can see the difference between contrabassoon and vocal contrabassoon, and then in the right side you can see different kinds of reeds: bassoon, baroque bassoon, contrabassoon, and contraforte. So you can see how it will feel different, and also the vocals, the dimensions are bigger. So you need, if you're gonna play, you can also play contraforte with a contra reed, but you will have to use a modifier, which they have. And we also have another instrument coming up in the market, and it's called the subcontrabassoon. Richard Bobo is the contrabassoonist in the Arkansas Philharmonic in the US, and he's building it from scratch. He just sent me these pictures of his progress. In the left side, you can see how he's envisioning his instrument, and in the right side, what he has done, he already cast the keys as well, and is making the pads, and has already the forms for the shapers for the reeds. I can imagine those reeds are gonna be like huge and tickle a lot when you start playing that. And I also can't wait for him to finish this behemoth, and I cannot imagine how the vibrations will feel in your lips and body. Please go and check him out in me.subcontrabassoon.com. He has a part for the subcontrabassoon, but this is a person who is a very studied person, very an intellectual, and he has written so much about the bassoon, more than I can even tell you. He in that me that subcontrabassoon.com, he has history of the instrument. He has fingerings, any kind of fingerings to a register that you could never imagine even existed in the Contra. And of his setup. He's just a plethora of information. But I digress now, and let's come back to basics with the bassoon. The bassoon is bent only one time and usually pulls out in 4 parts: boot joint, wind joint, long joint, and bell, plus the vocal and the reed. Most modern contrabassoons are bent 4 times, and none of those parts detach. Sometimes, mainly in Europe, we have contrabassoons with interchangeable, detachable bells, and also low A bells. The contra has 6 sections: vocal tube, which is that metallic tube where you feed the vocal. Thank you, Rick. um, Wing joint, which is that it has a little bend in the wood, as you can see it. Middle joint, bass joint, B flat joint, and bell. Also, there is a visible U tube that slides, which is crucial because it has a spit valve to get rid of the condensation. And it is the only tuning possibility of the contrabassoon. I have to, this is a side note, this spit valve was just put it in there randomly, but at the end, some people use it to vent for some high notes in the high register. I just wanted to mention that. Also, the YouTube has one octave vent. This one is the equivalent of the half hole for the middle G and A on the staff. The contrabassoon does not have holes, only keys. The reason for that is that the acoustical placement of the tone holes in the wood are way far apart. You need a hand span of at least 8 inches to reach both and front keys. My hand is 7 inches long from here to here. So I had to have my instrument modified by a luthier, and he enlarged the keys so I could reach and be more relaxed playing. So it can be challenging. And so means like I once tried a Pushner, um, and I couldn't reach at all. But then they contact me saying that they had made one with kleine hands. So it's challenging to have small hands. Also, there is no whisper key. The Contra has four vents that are supposed to take care of the octaves and such. The contrabassoon parts are attached by brackets and screws, and thus do not come apart. Big piece of advice. Never grab the contrabass bridge in the left picture because it will break. The screws are not very deep and it will come apart. And I'm going to show you right now two ways to hold the contrabassoon safely. Can you see me? Okay, the first one will be grabbing the contra by the two sides, and the second one will be grabbing like a little baby, like this. I like to grab it like this because I'm not putting any pressure in any sides, and it's very secure. It was a problem when I had to take an audition and I had to go from one room to another room with the instruments. So you have to trust the person that is helping you that they can carry one of the instruments. Okay. Contras are stored and transported in one piece, hopefully always in a hard case. The weight of the case is 45 pounds or 20 kilograms, and hard cases are 4 feet something, which is 1.3 meters. If you fly it with it on the hard case, you will have to pay extra size and overweight. It is also challenging fitting it into a small car. A small car like a Leaf or a smart car, or I have a Mazda Miata, and so I fit it straight up. And sometimes when I have the top down, and one time one person asked me if that was a golf bag, and I had my putt putts for the golf. It's kind of funny. Both instruments require vocals and reeds, but as you can see, there is a difference in size. The contravocal does not have a little nipple because there isn't a whisper key. Vocals are made with an alloy of metals from gold, brass, silver, nickel, and there is even a company that makes wooden vocal, the Parachutes in Greece. But I have not yet seen a wooden contravocal. As you can see, the reeds for the contrabassoon are considerably bigger. And just like the bassoon reeds, there can be huge variations between measurements, placement of the wires, and thicknesses. Here there are two contra reeds side by side, and you can observe the difference. Just that tiny difference in width makes a huge difference in pitch and sound. Bassoon and contra are held differently. Okay, I want to tell you this is kind of funny. This person, he's a private detective who is very into bassoon, and he begged me to be the model for that specific picture. So don't look at his embouchure, okay? He's just a he plays saxophone, but he loves the bassoon. So bassoon and contra are held differently. On the bassoon, you have the option of using a neck strap. Many European bassoonists use some kind of neck strap or upper body harness, even when they are sitting down. In the United States, we mostly use seat straps when sitting down. The contrabassoon has a pin that adjusts to the height of the chair you are sitting down, and the instrument is standing in front of your body in a vertical position. Sometimes you have to place your contra at an angle, otherwise it's hard to see the conductor or hard to see the music, so you'll have to look for the angle. Okay, now let's talk about embouchure. Embouchure, the same principles as for the bassoon. Always try to surround the reeds with your mouth, putting equal pressure on all sides. On the contra especially, try not to put a great deal of reed inside your mouth, as it's difficult to control, especially during pianissimo entrances. Because the reed is so big, you will feel the vibrations in your mouth at first, and it will tickle a little bit, but then you will get used to it. How does one find an ideal contra reed? Reed making equipment for contra and for bassoon as well is prohibitively expensive. Also, you first want to try to see if playing the contrabassoon is something that you would like to pursue long term. My personal suggestion is to first buy premier reeds from the reputable vendors in your country or in another country. Then I will tinker with those reeds, scrape, reshape, reposition the wires in a way to try to make them work for you. The qualities you are looking for in those reeds are first, first and foremost, a good response. Second, flexibility for tuning. And lastly, a good sound. Why in this order, you ask? As a contra player, I can tell you that there are many instances when you sit for 1,000 measures or entire movements and the next entrance is a post pianissimo or a solo. Also, flexibility in running and in tuning is essential to be a team player and adjust and compromise. And when I say sound last, it is because since you are a part of something bigger, the sound is not the most important at that moment, except when you are playing a solo. Don't get me wrong. I I am a sucker for a good sound in the contra. I always strive to get the reed that has the best sound, but I will not sacrifice an attack. Say you have to play also Sprach Zarathustra, and you have a reed that sounds beautiful, but the attack is hard. Mm-mm. Then you'll be better off with a reed that doesn't sound as great, but it's vibrating when you look at it. It's like so so soft, and you can start in a pianissimo because also Sprachta Gatrustra is like the rite of spring for contrabassoonists. You have to start really pianissimo, and it's kind of scary because the basses can start whenever, the organ can start pianissimo, and then there is a contrabassoon with the low C. Test the market to see what's out there. My first reeds I bought were Neurontin from France, and they worked for me for a while. Then I tried others and I came up with my own dimensions, the placement of the wires and the scraping measurements. I took the good qualities of each reed that I had bought and I finished my own Frankenstein reed. Another option in the market is a Legere synthetic contra reed. These are the Legere reeds compared to a bassoon reed. Legeres are expensive, but they will last for a long time. I was in the beta testing of the Legere when they were making these reeds, and I can tell you that from the first reed they sent to the last one, the very last one, they sent us several reeds, and we had to, um, you know, we had to rate them based on in a criteria that they had in advance, and the last read was there was a significant improvement. So they are very good as long as you take very good care. They are expensive, but I personally still prefer to stick bamboo cane reed. Before we go into excerpt, let's talk about the contrabassoon register. As you know, the contra is the lowest sounding woodwind instrument. The standard register starts at a low B, or a low A if you have a bell that has a low A. There are contras with a low A, but mainly in Europe. Notation wise, a written note sounds an octave lower. So you see that little 8 in the F in the bass clef, that means that low B flat it sounds an octave lower, many lines lower. But they just put it like that so we can read it. The fingerings for the contra from low B flat to the middle D on the staff are basically the same as the bassoon. And there are some variations in the second octave from the D to, this. In the second octave, there are little variations, And in the third octave, the fingerings are whatever works for that specific instrument you're playing. So good luck. I mean, I have several tips for to be ready if you get a new instrument, and I'll tell you it's actually the answer to one of the questions that was posed before. I hope that you receive a page, or you're gonna receive a page or a link with some fingerings for the Contra provided by Steve Brownstein. I told him I was doing this, and he sent me that out of the goodness of his heart. He sent me that he gives to his students at Contra, because in the San Francisco Conservatory they do have a curriculum for Contra. So if you just want to study Contra, that's a place to go. And in the other pages are links for sources that I have compiled. But there is also a plethora of information about the Contra at me.subcontrabassoon.com, which is Richard Bowles' website. So you want to check those places. What is the role of a contrabassoon? Okay, some people play as a solo in the contrabassoon. I'm more of an orchestral player, and so I can only tell you like my point of view, and it is this. To me, the role of a contrabassoon is to add to the sonority of a section and to become the liaison between the woodwind, string, and brass. I will later show you some examples. What people say about the contra is that you don't hear it per se, but you will notice if it's not there. Or sometimes you can hear the sonority. Sometimes the contra is an active participant in the woodwind section, like in the piece Nimbus 3000 by John Williams, where it showcases the whole sonic range of the woodwind section with passages that start with the piccolo and end with the contra. This is also present in a triplet passage in Mahler's Second Symphony in the last movement. Other times, the contra becomes part of the string bass section, like in Beethoven 5 and 9. And other time, the contra becomes part of the brass section, like in Mahler's Second and Brahms' First Symphony, the last movement. I did some recordings to demonstrate this. I play with a live recording. So I could not play like fortissimo or pianissimo. I just had to play one level. So I this recording with an orchestra in the background, so you can hear how the excerpt fits. All these orchestras were live performances, so the tempo varies a great deal, and I also did not play the full range of the dynamics. The first excerpt is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. This is a common piece performed in schools and is a standard audition excerpt, even in professional orchestras. In this piece, you sit for 3 movements and there is no pause between third and fourth movements. So you just have to know the music and you have to count and know when you have to start counting so you can come with everybody. Then the fourth movement starts with 2 bassoons playing the main motive, and the contrabassoon becomes a part of the double bass section. For this excerpt, a contrabassoonist must note the fingerings up to a high G natural and match the length of the note with the basses. Okay. The next excerpt is Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony. which brings me to the topic of staccatos on the contra. My own experience is that in order to get a decent sounded pitch on your staccato in the contra, you should not play it as pecky as the staccatos on the bassoon. So maybe a little bit longer with a lot of support, core support. In Justify, both first bassoon and contra are playing the same written line, but it sounds an octave lower in the contra. So orchestras play slower, and this was a live performance um, of I think Israel's Philharmonic or something. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about vibrato. This is my personal belief, is that vibrato should be an ornament of the sound and not part of all the sounds you produce. There are instances in the orchestra where vibrato is not appropriate, like in the chorale of Brahms' First Symphony. In this symphony, the contra is mostly playing the same part as the string basses, and it is a sonority liaison between the woodwinds and the strings. But for a fleeting moment in the last movement, the contra acts as a liaison between the trombones and the bassoon. So if you're playing in octaves with two trombones and a bass trombone, you don't want to use any vibrato, but you want to blend. And here is another example of a contra in a brass chorale when you have to play super pianissimo. Oh man, I just got goosebumps because that symphony is just perfect. I love that symphony. Also, there are real solos where it is totally appropriate to vibrate, like in the Ravel Concerto for the left hand. This is a piece that starts with the double basses playing sextuplets in pianissimo, and the contra has a floating solo. You are just soaring. It's just I cannot describe what it feels to play this solo in real life with an orchestra. Is one of the highlights of being a contrabassoonist. This is a difficult excerpt for breathing, but you have the basses playing the sextuplets. So you can take two big breaths because the basses will fill the space with those sextuplets. And you will also need a lot of air and core support to play across the three octaves. The next aspect about playing the contra that I would like to address is about switching between bassoon and contra within the same piece. There are a great deal of combined parts in the repertoire. Second and contra, third and contra, and fourth and contra. Or fourth and second contra, like in Mahler's second, because Mahler's second has two contrabassoons. You need core support and arm strength and the ability to adjust your brain to the new setup for the switch, the air and the reed size. Mother Goose, for instance, is a combined second bassoon and contrabassoon part. So there are three movements before the big conversations between the Beauty and the Beast, and one of the movements is tacit, but you in the other two movements you're playing bassoon, and then you suddenly have to play your feature as the soloist. So you have to adjust your brain and make sure that you all your setup, your reeds are wet, um, and that you know how that reed behaves, and you know the reed, and you know your instrument. So it takes a little bit to grab that, but it's possible. But it takes a little bit of practice. Talking about more switches in the opera Rose and Cavalier, there are um, approximately 21 switches between bassoon and contrabassoon, and some of them are really fast. Sometimes the switches are super fast. There are places where are almost impossible to switch, like in part of Concerto for Orchestra, where you have six measures at a really fast tempo. So sometimes bassoonists just leave the instrument in the lap, and the bassoon in the lap, and grab the contra and put the contra and take the instrument. It's too complicated. So you have to use your judgment to see if it's worth it that you damage your instrument by hitting something or breaking a reed. So you just have to use your judgment if it's worth it, the switch or not. And the last thing I would like to talk about is the care of the contra. Just because the contra is a bigger instrument, it does not mean that it's sturdier. On the contrary, the wood is very thin, in some places thinner than a bassoon, and therefore the screws don't go as deep as the screws on the bassoon. And the metal rods are fragile, and the contravocals are still way more fragile than the regular bassoon vocal. So I just want to show you, this is a representation of two professional bassoonists handling a contravocal, and it exploded. So we were just looking if cork was the cork was attached or not, and then when it just exploded like that. And so because they are very fragile, maybe there was a failure in the alloy metal. I don't think I ever mistreated a vocal, but things like that happen. So it's good that you have a second vocal available. This concludes my presentation. I would like to thank first, Mary Calo. She's here, and she's the one who help me do the very first presentation of this Contra 101. So she was very sweet and helped me. And now Rick Barrantes, who is doing it today, he was fantastic. And I would like to thank Julie Link for including us in this great program that she has started. I hope it just um, closes the barriers, and and unites the collective mind of the bassoonist. Go Contra!
Thank you so much, Leyla. Elizabeth shared a really good point of the contrabassoon is like the graham cracker crust underneath the orchestral pie.
Perfect, perfectly said.
Jack asks, do you have any tips for those of us who do not own a contra and find ourselves having to figure out new instruments?
Yeah, okay, that's one of the hardest thing. Okay, now for auditions, generally you have your own contra. It's like expected, But I mean, contras are very expensive. Very basic contras like $41,000, and although I have to say there are some in the market that are not so expensive, and you can find good instruments. But if you're gonna buy a good instrument, you have to make sure that you try it with a contra player, with a seasoned contra player. You know, um, I what I would say is that if you're gonna approach a new instrument because that orchestra has an instrument and you're coming to play with that orchestra, I will have reeds in different stages um, of finish, because that contra might need a freer reed or a harder reed to make a good sound and to function. And also, I would try to bring my own vocals. I know some Mollenhauers have a problem fitting the vocal, but I will make sure that I buy a good vocal with somebody, with an again consulting with a contra player. Just don't just go and buy a contra vocal. But I have one time I had to go and play in New Hampshire, couldn't fly with the contra, so I brought my vocal reeds in different stages, and I brought the YouTube, one of the YouTubes in my Fox, because I knew it was gonna fit that Fox, and the upper YouTube in my contra is made out of wood, made by Keith. This is the YouTube. It's not metal, so I just brought that. But and if you're playing something really challenging, I will bring a bunch of fingering charts. I make the effort of. It took me like 10 years to finally feel comfortable in the contra. So I had like I have tons of charts of different bassoon, different brands of instruments, the fingerings. So I will bring that with me. That's what I do now with Baroque. I have tons of fingerings, and I also bring them with me to rehearsals in case that I have the tuning is different, and I have to do that. So I think that I would do.
Layla, Jack also asks, is there a process that might make the reed adjustments and fingering decisions more efficient?
Well, um, I don't. I mean, I know the reeds that I make, and I mean, just make sure that they are balanced. And I actually can share another thing at the very end of the opening. To me, the opening in the contra reed, the opening, how I open it with the two fingers, is crucial. And make sure that the reed is balanced, and if you have a balanced reed, then it's vibrating from the back to the front uniform, so that opening in there needs to be balanced. When you close it, it has to close all at the same time, all at from the sides to the center.
Layla, Lorelei has asked, what new chamber music pieces do you know that includes contrabassoon that you could share about?
Well, what I can tell you is that there are tons of people writing for Contra, especially this year. This year it was just like tons of people. But like I wanted to recommend a book. This is one of the books that I have, and in this book it lists all the repertoire for Contra, chamber music compositions for Contra. But in the United States there is a place called Trepco, and it's they sell music, and what you do in there, you just press contrabassoon. It does it by instrumentation, and say that you want to play with a flute, and so um, so you just punch in there the instrumentation that you would like to play, and it gives you the pieces that there are. um, uh, Gernot Wolfgang just finished writing a piece called Rumble for two bassoons, two contras. Sorry, two contras. Is Jonas Steinman has a piece called Fish Face for two bassoons, Red Hot Duets, Red Hot Chilies or something like that by Herb. Victor Bruns has a fantastic quartet, many pieces also with piano. Um, what can I tell? In the IML, IMSLP, that International Music Library, you can find Handel, you can find um, other duets with viola. Um, so I mean, if you tell me specific instrumentation, I can tell you. But I mean, there is a plethora, and then in Europe there is the Omar Rones, Christian Omar Rones. He's just writing non-stop, and it's including contrabassoon in the quartets for bassoon, lots of quartets. The Dance of the Polar Bears by Gernot Wolfgang. Um, so I mean, there are tons of music. Also, if you just want to play duets, this Bomotier in this book that is for duos for bassoon, uh, all the Bomotier in there are transferred beautifully for bassoon and for two contras. Or if you want to play with a bassoonist. I love to play this baroque stuff with the other bassoonists because it's great for the tuning and to learn to play in a team and try to adjust to the tuning. And if you're just starting, the best thing is to play, you know, duets with somebody else and try, to be a team player.
Layla, Tim has asked, will you be saying anything or do you have any advice for composers writing for contrabassoon?
Yeah, and he just wrote a piece for Contrabassoon, actually, and so I would like to take a look at that piece. I think I downloaded, but I haven't looked at it. I mean, some composers are writing for Contrabassoon. I love it. They are writing. Some of them are writing really high. There are some concertos that, like the Ajo concertos. Those concertos are written for the fast system, and not everybody has that system of control. So it as even though is possible to play that high, it's not pleasant. It's like um, for instance the Adam Symphony number one. You're playing the symphony and it's technically difficult, and it ends with a high E in the contra, and if you don't hit it, it will ruin the whole performance for you. So I don't know how pleasant it is to play in the high register for the contra. I don't know. My advice will say that I would hear something lyrical in the middle range for the instrument. I haven't heard a lot of pieces like that, so I don't know. I would like to hear like musical pieces, bassoonistic pieces with the staccato tuning pieces, but not super high register because it's not. I was teaching somebody the sonata, the York sonata, and it ends with a high D. And I told her, do not, don't. She was always stressed out because with that note, and I said, don't. If you just feel like you're nailing it and you just don't wanna, just play it in the low. It's okay. It's like Tanzman or something like that. If you are beginning, just play it in the lower octave and don't suffer. Or there are people who never play, Sarabanda and Cortege because it has a high F, or like when I mean, it's like don't let that be a limitation. You know. So I would say that for a composer, try to compose um, a piece for the most contrabassoonists instead for the few who nail the high register, and only the pros, and it should be like something for everybody.
So the next question, Layla, is from Cassandra, and she says, what are some strategies
Hi, Cassandra.
you could recommend for finding a decent contrabassoon, entry level or otherwise?
Yeah, I have to, you know, Christian Maroons. published a piece that actually Rick, and it has Contra. So check it out. Go to that and check that piece because it's for two oboes and two bassoons and Contra or something like that. Rick 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 will say it. Anyway, Cassandra. Back to Cassandra. Okay, so I would. There are good instruments that are not very expensive, but there are few. Um, I can't remember the brand, but I tried one that was like $5,000, and I will have used that as my second instrument because I really now $5,000 back then, but make sure that you go with a contrabassoon to to buy this instrument because it's just so different, the approach. Like I said, it's like learning another language. I mean, you're Italian, you are Spanish, but you understand a little bit of Italian, but it's not the same. So it's the same thing with the contra and the bassoon. Just make sure that you go with somebody who you trust to get an instrument, and there are amati instruments that are good and will be perfectly fine for a school. And if you have the funds to buy a great instrument, go ahead, and it's better. And if you think that you are going to pursue this as a profession and just going to be a professionalist, then you have to wait and get a good instrument because the competition is fearless now. I mean, people have their own instruments, they have excellent instruments, and they can play that thing up and down. So if it's something that is gonna be like your passion, what you're gonna be doing, then you buy a good instrument with a good vocal, you know.
Maria has asked, I would like to ask about the warm up on the contrabassoon and if you could suggest some exercises.
Okay, so this brings me to the books that I use. First of all, it's in IMSLP. I can never say that. That there is a Brown, Jan Daniel Brown, and solo bassoon. They were written in the 1740s. They are perfect pieces to warm up because if you are playing something baroque, you can hear the intonation really well. You can hear the thirds. You can hear, if you're playing something contemporary, then you don't know if you're sharp. But I mean, you can hear the relationship of the notes in a scale. So I warm up a lot with that. I also warm up with this. Bach cello suites. And because I try a lot of reeds with those things because there are a lot of slurs going down, up, and I just want to know if my reed is very flexible in going up or down. So I use that a lot. But if I have to get book, there are also different books of warm up, like this Henniger book, and also this one that was written a long time ago. This one from this series that's Fagot, and also there is another by Hertel and Breikov of excerpts. That's great. But if I were to get one book, I would just save $40 and buy this book. This book is excellent. It has all kinds of exercises, warm up. It tells you the story of the instrument. It tells you where in the repertoire is the contrabassoon is needed. It's in three languages: Italian, English, and German, and it has exercises that start with long tones, very long tones. It's a great book. I absolutely love this book, and it tells you also the repertoire for chamber music. So this is a good book. This will be this good book to buy for me. I play a lot from here, little studies from here, and some of the studies are related to the excerpts, so it's great for a warm up. Um, that I do. I also warm up with long tones, and I also and scales a lot um, when I'm on stage to try the reeds, and that's basically what I do.
Miles has asked, what are your favorite pieces to play on Contra?
Well, like I said, I like to play Baroque. There's this piece by Corette, Las Delicias de la Solitude, and it's for bassoon and basso continuo. I have played basso continuo, and also in the Selencas I have played basso continuo. It's a lot of fun. I love Baroque. I just feel like it just puts me in my place with the scales and the tuning, and I practice excerpts. I very few times I do solo, but I have done solo on those Brown pieces, the Jan Daniel Brown. Those are pieces that you can play in a recital as a solo pieces. I have played that, and then I have played other pieces, but I really don't remember the name of the composer. But nothing super serious. I've done a Victor Brun sonata, uh, but that's not what I do. I'm mostly playing 3 programs a week. So a lot of playing. And I also, our orchestra also rotates, so I get to play principal, second, so I'm always really busy trying to make reads. And I also play in a Baroque group, so I play Baroque bassoon. So I have to practice everything. I'm not like a natural talent. So
Leyla Roberto has asked, well, speaking of juggling all of these different positions, how do you use your time better? Do you have any, suggestions or tips on how to manage time and stay organized?
oh God. Okay. Well, just keep your focus, and be responsible. If you get a goal in mind or something you want to do, try to do it really well. Exhaust everything in your power to get it done. And sometimes it will take more time than what you think. But you know, I when I was taking auditions, I had one goal, and it was like to try to master um, Mariachi Figaro. So I wrote my own exercises, and I so if you're gonna do something, just commit and do it. Don't and also something that is detrimental to your playing is procrastination. Don't procrastinate making reads. And be always prepared. Have reads blanks made for the year. Have some reads in different stages. I scrape some reads and then leave them alone, and then when a concert it's coming up, I start scrape for those reads, but they are already started, so the process is easier than cutting a blank right then.
The last question is from Richard Meek, and he's asked, what do you do when encountering a low A?
Okay, so that brings me to me.subcontrabassoon.com. He has he has the measurements for all kinds of extensions going to a low E, from that A to a low E. So you can look in there, and usually it's a PVC tube. I have not I have encountered low A's a few times, and and then you have to take the decision: are you gonna sacrifice the B flat for the low A? What's more important? Sometimes when I play third or fourth bassoon, yes, I will sacrifice that because I know somebody else is playing the B flats. But I play the A's with the low A extension in the bassoon. And in the contra, I will just decide if that A is really important and audible, then I will get an extension. And the extension that Richard Bobo makes in there works great. I used to have one out of cardboard, but then I was house sitting a dog, and he destroyed it. So I don't have it to show it.
Oopsies.
Oops.
Leyla, and finally, just what's something new that you've learned recently that you'd want to share about? It can be not music related, anything that comes to mind, or cooking, or since being in lockdown, and anything fun you'd want to share about.
Well, okay. Well, now I've learned patience, a lot of patience, and I also learned how to cope better with stress thanks to 2020. And um, and that also, don't procrastinate, even though we're like somehow stopped. I'm trying to produce, little videos for our orchestra. I'm trying to make reads. I want to be prepared when we start playing. I already have reads. I have reads in different stages. I have the excerpts of the music that I think they are going to play. Like our conductor told us, he wants to do Mahler second to open a season, and I'm been practicing that. So don't procrastinate.
Yeah, Mary.
I was just giving her a round of applause. Yes.
Mary
Bravo.
was the one who the one who helped me put this first. The very first that we did. We did it at a Make Quickly, and
Wow.
Mary was my assistant.
Thank you so much, everybody.